Okay, so guys, thank you for joining us for this series. And if you're new, this is the very first workshop for our Start Something Side Hustle series. And I am Diana Wright. So I work at the Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship. And really what we do at the Papa John Center is we help people like you who might be joining the call start something. So whether that is just discovering a side hustle or launching a business, or even thinking about how do you solve problems and come up with these really interesting ideas. We help community members, we help students. So we're definitely here for you, and we're really excited about this series today. So a little bit background about the Side Hustle series. So we actually kind of came up with this idea as it related to the pandemic. So we have all at least been at home, and some of us are still at home. And it's allowed people to really rediscover what they're passionate about and figuring out, what it is that they dream about doing. So we've really seen this kind of resurgence of people looking at side hustles. And we're excited to kick off the series today, but there will be 7 different panels and workshops all the way throughout April. So I encourage you guys to look at that. And with that, we will get started here. So a little bit of etiquette today. We will be making sure everyone is muted, but there will be time for questions. So if you have questions throughout this, I will be interviewing Samantha, but feel free to use the chat function. And then we will be taking a break, and that will also allow for anyone to ask questions and kind of show whether you want to sign on and show your video. We're happy to do that and make this really interactive. So I will click through here. All right, so a little bit about Samantha and who's with us today. I have known Samantha for probably the last 5 or 6 years, ever since I started here at Iowa State. And she has been a wonderful mentor to a number of students in our entrepreneurship programs. So both Samantha and I, we have a marketing hat that we have worn, and she's also a very valuable mentor to me as well. So with that, Samantha, if you want to just get started, introduce who you are, and then really go into the story of Zayo and even Model Farm today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be the first kickoff speaker of this Side Hustle series. I really do have a passion for just people who are like going at it and figuring out what their dreams are and trying it. Fake it till you make it is a mantra that has gotten me really far in my life. And so, like Diana said, my name is Samantha Grove. I worked in marketing for probably about, I'm going on 20 years now of being in the industry. Sort of worked my way through event planning and got into healthcare marketing. But as I continued to grow in my career, I just noticed more and more the need. Actually, the need is what drove me to start my own small business, doing marketing for small businesses and nonprofits. And it started out as a side thing. I was actually sitting on the Chamber of Commerce in Nevada, which is a small town outside of Ames, where I was working. And I saw that there were so many small businesses who needed help. And they were asking me for help anyway. And nonprofits were asking me to volunteer my time to run their social media or help with their website or whatever it might be. And I think that's really a great place to start any side hustle is where is the need? And so I thought, man, I can help these people and I can make some money. I was kind of getting a little itchy in my career, like, I don't really know. Do I want to continue working for someone else? And honestly, I started it as a side project, sort of on a whim. And before I knew it, it was becoming a thing that took a lot of my time. And as many of you probably know, as you're starting to grow your businesses or thinking about growing your businesses, you definitely have to get to a point where you're just doing a lot before you can really take it full time. And so I worked part-time running Zayo 525, my sort of marketing services agency, for over 4 years before I decided I could take the plunge, figure out my own health insurance and fund my own retirement and things like that. And let's be honest, my retirement was definitely not fully funded during that time. Before I really could say, yeah, I'm going to have enough clients that I can make this a full-time gig. And so I did that for 3 years. I worked full time running Zayo, and life evolved and things were changing. I got married and I knew I was going to start a family, and I was thinking, gosh, what is next? I have all these clients who count on me. Just logistics. How could I ever take maternity leave? I have all these clients that want to, do projects, and I don't want to let them down. And so things were evolving, and I was thinking about what's the next step. And Model Farm was doing the exact same type of services here in Ames via Iowa State students who are doing marketing projects for a lot of the same types of businesses that I was serving. And I always say there's so much room for marketing services, even in Ames or across the state. I mean, you could have hundreds of us doing marketing, and the competition would still not be too horrible. And so I thought, geez, they're doing the same thing I'm doing. And sort of one conversation led to another. And in 2019, I ended up merging Zayo with Model Farm. And so now I'm the senior account exec for Model Farm. And it was something I never, ever thought ever. I mean, as you are all starting thinking about side hustles and gosh, I want to like get away from working for someone else, or I want to do my own thing. I have that same entrepreneurial spirit. And I never thought, gosh, somebody might actually want my business, or I could sell it, or I could merge it, or, the opportunities are so endless. I just always tell people, keep the door open, because you never know what's actually going to come about. So yeah, that's the kind of the story of how I evolved in the marketing profession, and I'm excited to talk more about it today.
Cool. So I guess, and talk a little bit about Model Farm in case people don't know what that is, if they've never heard of it from Iowa State.
Absolutely. So Model Farm is a creative services incubator that we are in. We partner with Iowa State University in that we help bridge the gap from the classroom to the real world for students in not only the business school with marketing, but graphic design, copywriting, project management, all of the things that make up a marketing agency. Students can come into Model Farm, work for us. They're paid for the work, and really learn about how to be a professional, get some great hands-on portfolio building type experience. They get to work with clients and do projects from start to finish. And so, again, Model Farm was providing those services using the student sort of talent pool. And Zayo was providing those services using a freelance talent pool. And so we've sort of merged them together, and that there's just a really great opportunity for students, but there's also some backup support with the freelance team. And really interestingly, freelance is just becoming this new, it's taking off. Like Diana said, in the pandemic, there's so much opportunity for people to work from home and that kind of thing. So not only are students getting a chance to see what it's like to work in an agency, but now they can also see, gosh, maybe I just want to freelance and do one little piece of this marketing puzzle. And so that's kind of the Model Farm mission, really, is to help students see what it's like in the real world and give them all the real world experience. I mean, it's one thing to know how to design a brochure, but it's a whole nother thing to write the email that goes with the brochure that you have to send the client, and how to deal with taxes, and how to manage your all the things, right? Manage everything that comes with owning a business.
Cool. Thank you. So I'm going to move to our next slide, which kind of goes right into first defining what we're talking about today. So there's this term company of one that I'm a little more familiar with, where basically it's becoming more and more popular because people either want more control of their lives and even autonomy in their lives to be able to choose what their calendars look like, but also make sure that, they have a life. And I know it's a difficult line with entrepreneurs, is that sometimes if you're an entrepreneur, it's just meaning you won't have a life. But in this case, really positioning a company of one, or even an iMarketer, how, Samantha, do you look at, and from when even just working and starting as a side hustle, how did you define the work and also make sure there was a really good balance for work-life integration, or even if there wasn't, talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're right in all the respects, right? Sometimes there's so much work, but really, I think what the heart of the issue is, when you're getting ready to sort of be this company of one, is that you're doing work that you love. And when you do the work that you love, it often doesn't feel like work. And that sounds so cliche, but for me, in my experience, I really started integrating my work and my life. And my very first clients were some of my best friends. That's actually, I had a friend who was running a cell phone chain of like cell phone store chain. And she put out on Facebook that she was looking for a marketing person. And it was like a red light or a light bulb to me saying, gosh, like you don't need a full-time marketing person. Like you need a few things done. Like, let me help you. And that was my first client. And, I think that we kind of, it's evolving, but there was so much this mindset of like, I go to work, but really your work is your passion. And if you're helping the people that are already part of your life, it just really easily becomes integrated. And so I think there's a work-life balance is this word that I often say doesn't exist. There is no balance. It's not like, 50% of the time I do my work and 50% of the time I play with my child. It's not like that. But it can be integrated. And if you're, want to take a road trip over Memorial Day weekend, but you have some emails to get out, you can do it in the car. And, I always say like, I do so much work from my phone anymore that basically anywhere I go, I can work. And my clients can text me when, everything used to have to be a phone call. And so it's so evolving. And for me, that was appealing. I wanted to have my friends to be my clients, to be my, just all of it meshing together. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely, there are times where you're just like, oh my gosh, why are you, sending me a Facebook message at midnight? Like clients, please, here's a boundary. But those times are much more rare than what I found is like this great way to sort of work it all together. And honestly, I had a lot of people asking me like, how do you do this? And so when you say, how do you define an iMarketer? To me, that was the label I put on this marketing person who was running an agency and living her life at the same time. You can do it part-time, you can do it full-time, whatever you want to do. And so I launched a sort of side business helping other women, specifically women was my target audience, which we might talk about later, start these companies if they wanted to stay home with kids or if they wanted to travel the world or whatever it might be. I labeled them iMarketers and wrote a book for them and gave them a lot of resources on how to do this.
And kind of to the next point, so in order to achieve like this autonomy and having the freedom to have a company of one, you first have to master the skill set, like you have to offer something.
Yes.
So I guess what are ways that you first developed your skill set? Like if you remember working with that first client, did you know what you were doing or what were the resources and people that helped you define the skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, I had sort of grown up in the marketing world. And to be honest, for me, I had an agency. I had the luxury of hiring an agency when I was working for a healthcare system. And so I got to sort of see, like, what is it like to have somebody come in and help me do my marketing? And so I got some firsthand experience of what that relationship could look like and where they could provide value to me. And then I started realizing, hey, I could provide that value to somebody else. But also, definitely, I'm not shy in saying fake it till you make it. Like I knew that I could figure anything out. And in today's day and age, you just YouTube it and you can figure something out, right? So I did lots of research. Whenever I would sell something that I didn't know how to do, I would go and figure it out. And some of those clients in the early days probably I always said they got better than what they would have got on their own. And if I would look back now and say, gosh, did I really like design? Like, was that brochure the best? It was better than what they had without me. And so that was always just really a litmus test for me. Is that better than what they would be doing on their own? And then if that's the case, it's providing value. And also another little sort of like tip, I guess, I used my vendors to really help me figure out the marketing world. When I had a client who wanted to do a billboard, I didn't know how to do a billboard. But I called the billboard company and I said, please tell me how to do a billboard. And they sent me their spec sheet and said, this is how it works. And you can have vinyl or you can have paper. And this is how often you buy them. And they taught me about billboards. And then when I had a client who wanted to do a commercial, I did the same thing, you know. So you don't have to know everything from the start. You can just evolve and use the vendors are going to help you because they want to sell you their services. So
Yep.
that's sort of a free resource out there waiting to be tapped.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to move on and talk about the work. And so when you're first starting as a freelancer, and maybe your neighbor asked you to help them with their social media, but where do you really start? So like, do you take it as more of a specialty where, okay, I'm only going to hone in on social media, or thinking more about the full service where it actually involves the subcontractor model that you started?
Right. So I think it really depends on your personality and your goals and your, you know, your skill set. If you are looking at yourself and saying like, I can provide value to a client because I have a lot of connections. I have somebody I know who can do graphic design and I could write, or gosh, I do website development, but I have someone else who could help with social media if I needed, then, you know, potentially that full service model is the way to go. And for me, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the expert that would help them write strategy and figure out what they needed for a marketing plan. And then I pulled in all of these freelancers to actually do the work. And it didn't start that way. When it very first started, it was me doing all of everything. And I had one graphic designer because that was a skill I did not have. But then when my client said, gosh, I really want a website, and I tried to do my own website and it was a disaster, I found a website person. I said, hey, like, can you be my website person? And if I sell websites, will you do them for me? And so it grew and grew. And when Zayo merged with Model Farm, there was over 50 freelancers sort of in the pool that I could choose from when I needed them. And I would continuously grow it. I needed somebody who had a drone. I'd find somebody who did drone work. I needed somebody who did interior design. I found an interior designer, and I brought them into my sort of system. And by that time, I had a more of a system where they were vetted and did all the paperwork and that kind of thing. But for me, that really worked because I wanted to be the hub, and I wanted to help my clients who had lots of different needs. The flip side is you might only want to be a graphic designer. And if you only want to do graphic design and you don't want to get into digital world, or you don't want to have copy, you can sell that service as well. Like, I just do this one thing. But unfortunately or fortunately for you, your clients will ask you for the rest. So you need to have a plan that says, gosh, I don't do video, but here's the person I'm going to reference or recommend you to, because clients don't want to have 50 different people that they have to talk to usually. And so they sometimes will do it, but it's always nice to have a recommendation ready for them.
Mm-hmm. So Sydney just asked, how do you actually find those freelancers to bring into your pool? Are they friends, connections? What sources do you find?
Sister-in-law, you know, really, it really is all the above. So when I first started, actually, my first graphic designer was a designer that I had worked with when I was in my, job that I was getting paid for as an employee. And so I sort of brought her with me. She was a referral from a vendor. The vendor was like, hey, we have a graphic designer you could use. She does freelance. And all of a sudden I ended up working with her for over 10 years. Then I needed a copywriter, and my friend was a copywriter or doing copy, could write copy. And I said, hey, can you like write some copy for me on the side? Are you interested in that? She was getting paid. She was happy. And the network grew. And there were times where I sort of tapped out. Gosh, I don't know anyone who has a drone. How do I find someone who has a drone? So then I just used my network. I looked on LinkedIn. I talked to people who knew people. There are people usually in your life that have lots and lots of connections. And so in Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media you're using is a great resource. Put out there that you're looking for somebody who can do this, and this skill. And usually you'll have, 5, 10, 15 referrals in no time. So then you just look at their work and make sure that it's up to the quality that you want it to be, and sort of interview them, decide if they're going to be a good fit for your. There's even a sort of company of one has a culture. And I definitely had a way that I did business, and I wanted those subcontractors to do the work the same way that I did business. And it worked very well for me from the very beginning to say, like, this is how I do it. If you're like on board with that, then let's rock and roll. And if you're not, that's totally fine. We're just not a good fit. And over, 7 years of those people, have many of them are still working with us today.
Mhm. And kind of to that point, or even just to clarify, Samantha, if you can say, Haley asked, if you're recommending people to your clients, how do you actually make a profit? So can you talk a little bit how you're kind of building the project management into that?
Yes. So if you're doing the model like I was doing, and I was coordinating all of those people for the client, I was charging a project management fee on top of every service that I was providing. So if, just a very basic example, if I had a $500 project and I needed a graphic designer, and the graphic designer said, I'm going to charge you $200 to do this, I would charge the client the $500 and make the $300 difference. So there's a couple ways you can make money. One is upcharge what the freelancer is doing for you. And you can do both ways. And the other is to charge a project management fee. So your services are valuable. You're the expert. You're the one who has the connections. You're the one who is having all those conversations. You're doing the quotes in the beginning. You're doing the billing at the end. So you have to get paid for that. And then if you want to just refer people, then you can work out a referral fee with a subcontractor or a freelancer. I use subcontractor loosely, as a lot of people call it freelancers, but for me, it was a subcontract relationship. So that's what I labeled everybody. And you can do like a 10% referral fee or something like that. If I send you somebody and you do all the paperwork and you have that relationship with them and you do all the emails directly, I would like a 10% referral for everything I give you. And a lot of freelancers will be happy to do that because you're doing the sales work for them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Great question.
Okay, so we're going to keep moving on. And a lot of times this might be the first thing people think of when they're starting a marketing business, or it might also be the very last thing they think of is developing a brand. So can you kind of talk about like, where do you actually start when, like, maybe it is like, okay, I've been doing some freelancing work on the side, but now I actually maybe want to come up with a more finite name and tell my story to actually make this a reoccurring thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I often say to pretty much every small business that your brand is you. Your brand is your personality. And it's very difficult to be like, oh, I'm over here. I'm this like super introverted person, but I'm going to make this brand that's like super out there and extroverted and networking and all of the things that I am not. So I would say or recommend to start really thinking about who are you as a person. And for me, as I was looking at how I wanted to start my business and build the brand around it, I am 100% a person who wants to make my clients happy. And for me, making them happy was doing this connecting work and providing them value in that respect and being able to be their person. I wanted to be their person. They called Sam for everything. And if they needed an interior designer to tell them what color to paint their walls, I was going to find it for them. And that became my brand. And as I worked on my website and even named my company, Zao means full of spirit and energy and efficiency and effectiveness. And those were all words that sort of described me. And so as I was looking at naming my company and building the colors of the brand, I mean, the visual identity of the brand is very full of like spirit and life. And that was who I am, as a person. So as you're thinking about your brands, you can think about who you are as a person. Are you like the steady Eddie? Are you really like learning is your thing and you love absorbing and researching all this stuff? That can be the value that you offer. But I would definitely say don't try to be something you're not, because that definitely won't work. and I think after you are doing it a little bit, if you're getting some side business and you're thinking, gosh, I should really like make this a thing, what do your clients say about you? When they write you thank you emails, are they saying, gosh, you like researched that for me and you tracked that thing down and that was so helpful? Or are they saying, hey, thank you for that connection to the, website developer. That was great. So look at what they're already seeing in you and then build from that.
So kind of to your point too, what are some common pitfalls that people by not having a brand? What would you say?
Well, I think for sure, like people need to be able to find you. And I think as a subcontractor sometimes or a freelancer, sort of get lost in the mix if you don't have a presence. If you are just like, gosh, I'm just going to do graphic design and probably people will find me. No, nope, they won't. So really having some search engine optimization done on your website, making sure that you have a portfolio out there that people can easily look at. They can contact you for more information. Those things just help you be found quicker. And of course, word of mouth is always the best form of marketing, but people need to have a place where they can go back and like say, oh, like I heard that Diana's like a really great writer and she's doing some writing for this business. So I want to like go look at who is Diana. Let me look at her stuff. Let me look at, is she a real person? Like, is she going to file taxes? I'm not really sure. So it helps to feel like you're a legitimate business to your, prospective clients.
So we just kind of started talking about that, but actually getting more into the identity of what makes a brand. So can you talk more on name, logo, if it's a tagline, and even like the niche, getting into what is the industry that you might actually want to focus on?
Right. I often tell people that I would say one of the, I don't know if mistakes is really the right word, but one of the things I wish I would have maybe done differently is to work on it, like figure out what niche I wanted to be in, because the word of mouth is strong in an industry specific service that you're providing. So if I would have said, gosh, I have all this experience in healthcare marketing, I'm going to work on healthcare marketing projects and I'm going to serve on the healthcare marketing board and I'm going to like go to the healthcare marketing trade show, it just like narrows down the group of people who are your prospective clients. And, you work with one hospital and then they refer you to a clinic and all of a sudden you're working on this surgeon's thing and your name becomes synonymous with the industry. And so I would say that is something that potentially, if I were to, give that guidance after the fact, I would say, yeah, I would probably do that. I have one of the iMarketers that sort of took my book and advice and ran with it. And she's just really focused on small community development, rural Iowa development. She's really in touch with the Travel Iowa people. People refer her to other, she works with one community and then they refer her to another small community. And she's done really, really well doing that. And so just something to think about as you're starting. I thought I was getting a niche when I said I was working with small businesses, but that is such a vast group that it really wasn't narrow enough. So for me, as I was developing my brand, that was what I went after, is small businesses and nonprofits. I felt comfortable in that space. I knew there was a need. That was the very reason I started, was that small businesses had the need. And so I built my company brand around that. I knew that those mostly owners were like wearing lots and lots of hats. They needed someone to come in with that energy and spirit to say, gosh, I can help you with your marketing. And they're just like, oh my gosh, thank goodness you're here. Like my point of sale system went down today. I lost an employee. I'm, trying to keep the doors open, whatever it might be. And they wanted that sort of breath of fresh air. And that's the brand that I personally built because I felt like I could offer it. And I created a company name that was important to me and meant something to me. And so you don't have to do that. A lot of people name their business after themselves. There's sort of pros and cons there. But, I think it's worth thinking about, like, who do you want to be known as, and then go from there.
I kind of went into the next slide since we already started talking about absolutely finding your ideal customer. And do you remember when you first got started, or at any point, did you ever create like a top 10 list of here's the areas that I feel least most confident in, like whether you had worked in jobs like that, or how did you kind of create a top 10 list of even people to reach out to?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew areas that I knew stuff about. Like I wanted to work in industries that often I was connecting with service providers. I didn't really want to help sell cars or help sell products. I was less in the retail space and more in the service space. So for me, it was really just thinking about like, what do I like and what do I care about and who are my friends? You know, what are my friends doing and what are the people in my network doing? Um, and like I said, my friend was my first client and she was selling cell phones. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll do that. I didn't really want to do products, but here we are. But really, the cell phone industry is about service, not about products. So, you know, thinking through the people in your life already, the person that you're serving next to in the young professionals, or the friend of your mom, or the whatever people that are in your network that could be a sort of stepping stone client is a really great place to start. And then of course you have your like, you know, your dream list. Like I can't wait till I get to work with that person. We just started having conversations with a city, a local city, and that's always been on my list. I really want to rebrand a city. So even today, 10 years into this, you know, I'm excited about that prospect that I've been thinking, gosh, I would love to work with a city, and here we are. So keeping those sort of dream clients on the list is always good too.
So can you talk more about like what should be expected of a marketer to market their own business? Because I know it all the way from there's people that only do referrals only. And then there's people who have spent, you know, thousands of dollars to actually get everything kind of up and running, whether it's a website, doing automated emails, networking, you name it. So what did you do and what would you recommend to someone starting out?
Well, the good news is I did both ways. And you know, I can say there's pros and cons to both. But when I started, I do think it's important to get a website, but you don't have to have a $15,000 website to get going. We did our own website by ourselves, trudging through it when I started, you know, and I think you have to do some of that DIY stuff because unless you have a huge budget, that's just the nature of the beast. Managing your own social media and sort of creating that presence for yourself. Obviously, word of mouth is really important. And so I did lots of coffee dates with all of my vendors. Or, hey, if your printer is working with another small business who needs a marketing person, like they'll refer someone to you. So doing that networking and asking for the referral, like, hey mom, do you have any friends, you know, that I remember the first time I got a client from my mom and she didn't even really know what I did, but I think you do marketing, and this person, my friend, she thought she needed something, so you know, I'm connecting you. They come from everywhere. So I think you can absolutely build an entire company, do a huge fancy website, have an email automated system, running social media, writing blogs, and have zero customers. And to be honest, that I did that with iMarketer and learned the hard way that just because you have something fancy does not mean that people are going to like knock on your door and just buy what you're offering. And so I would really recommend, as a side hustle, as you're getting going, having something that's professional, but not investing just a ton of money into it or time. Your time is better spent actually going out and networking and trying to get the client.
And I know I'll just kind of add from my lens of working at an entrepreneurship center. So we support entrepreneurs and small business owners every day, all year. And that is always a focus. Marketing is something that a lot of people do not have in their skill set. And so I've always noticed like it's a huge need when it comes to working with an entrepreneur, is helping them even just find the right marketing person for them, or a graphic designer. So if you guys are listening, just kind of keep that in mind. Like there are certain verticals that you can kind of think of. And I would just say that entrepreneurs and small businesses, like that is a big group, and they will always need marketing help. And kind of thinking about it in that way. And then, as you just said, networking is showing up to events that might be related to that.
Right. And if you're introverted and you're like, the thought of going to a chamber after hours is like panic inducing, you know, you can do networking in other ways. You can send emails on LinkedIn. You can set up virtual coffees. You can like ask for referrals via email. It doesn't always have to be what you think of as like this typical like networking event. Although it is good for people to see your face and know who you are. But also, one little side tip, like the marketer should have good marketing. So if somebody is looking at you as potentially helping them, and they're seeing that you have this like website that doesn't work, or social media that hasn't been updated for 2 months or whatever it might be. There is a little bit of that. Like, you don't have to be super expensive, awesome, everything, but you should have like a buttoned up presence because they're judging you on how well you're going to do their marketing by how well you're doing your own.
Yeah. And to that point, how important do you think it is to like actually have a business email?
I would absolutely recommend it. If you can, I mean, you can make a Gmail account and that's not quite all the way professional. Like, it's not matching your domain name, but it's so easy to get a business email and at least get a Gmail account that is professional. Don't use your, 1999 Yahoo email account for your business.
Good point. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here. If anyone has any questions, like, you can certainly type that in chat, but you can also come on and ask Samantha. So we'll take about 5 minutes for questions before we get into the next part. If we don't, we can keep on going too.
I'm seeing one question in chat about where you can find the iMarketer book. It's all part of the iMarketer package, which you can find information on at iMarketerlife.com. At the current juncture, when I launched iMarketer, it was an entire package with a book and a community and all these things. Didn't ever really like become the thing that I thought it was, and it's continued to evolve and a little bit more into like a consulting type service. But feel free to look around there and see if there's anything you like. And then if you are interested in the book, you can just shoot me an email and I can connect you and we can figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Skylar just asked, how do you get nonprofit clients who have limited funds to pay for your services?
It's a great question, a really great question. When I first started out, I just did the work that they could afford, basically. And if they only had a small budget, then we did a small budget project. So if they didn't have money to do a full website, I said, okay, well, can I help you design the homepage and you can build the rest yourself, or whatever it might be. So I think being really flexible and knowing that you can offer a little bit that can help them go a long way. Another really great thing you can do is help them write a plan. So offer them the strategy, write a marketing plan for them that they can then execute themselves. Is great. It is hard to sell a nonprofit a marketing plan when they have a very limited budget and they don't know if they want to like spend money on just a piece of paper. But if you believe in the value of that plan and you know that it will help them save money in the end, that's part of the sales process, right? Getting them to understand your value is really important. And one like little tip that I learned the hard way is that people will pay for things that they find value in, and you have to know that your services are valuable up front. So I was like doing a bunch of work for a small business and just like making pennies and really not like, it was barely worth my time. And then I found out that they were paying a consultant like $40,000 to talk with them on the phone once a week. And I was like, what? Like, I'm doing all this stuff and I am making nothing compared to that. And it was a really, really eye-opening moment for me to say, like, well, what is the value of what you're providing? Like, are you selling yourself as valuable like that consultant did? Or are you selling yourself as like, oh, like, I'm just this person who works with small businesses and I will take whatever you can give me kind of mentality. So I think knowing your own value up front is also important. Nonprofits do have money, actually. They just choose to spend it in, they're making choices on where they spend it. And so you have to get yourself into a position that you're worth their money.
Awesome. So I'm going to keep us moving because there's actually a question that was asked that we're going to be covering soon. So we're going to get into more now of the second part of the business basics. And just to kind of start right away, we're going to talk about the advisory crew. So this question gets asked a lot, even in just starting a general business. It doesn't even have to be marketing. But can you go back in time to like walk through, like, what did you do as far as your legal structure? Because I'm aware of some people just do it under their individual name if they're a freelancer, all the way to actually setting up a sole proprietorship or even an LLC. And so can you kind of talk us through, how did you find the know-how of how to even approach this and what was right for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of different ways to do it. And so that's important to know, that just because my way was one way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But I did choose to set up an LLC when I started because I wanted to separate my personal finances from the business. And so even though it seems very rare that you're going to get sued or something like that when you're just doing such small, marketing work isn't something super risk involved. There are things that could happen. You could accidentally send a social media post that caused somebody to lose money or things like that. So for me, it was important to sort of say, this is my business. And also it really legitimizes what you're doing. So if you've been doing the side hustle and I had, family members and people like that were kind of like, what are you doing over here? And I was like, no, I'm a real business. And for me, it was important to say, I am starting a business. I had a business launch party where I invited people, like, I am officially starting a business. And that was important to me mentally, to get into my head, like, you're going to work on this and it's a real thing. So the legal structure sometimes helps with that too. You can use an attorney. You don't have to. And in the state of Iowa has really great resources on the Secretary of State's website about, how to figure out if you want to be an LLC or a C Corp or S Corp, or just run it under your own Social Security number, which is perfectly fine until you make a certain amount of money. All of those resources are available from the state. They have really great, they just have great reading materials. Also, the small business development centers in the state have lots of information. I know, Diana, you would have information on this for people. And I had a brother-in-law who happened to be an attorney. So I wrote up my own actual document that I had to send to the state, and he looked at it and said, yep, that looks good. And off it went. So there's all kinds of downloads online that you can find. So you don't have to go all in. But then later, as my business evolved and I wanted to do some different things with taxes, I did involve an attorney and wrote sort of some articles of operation and things like that, because I wanted to start taking more advantage of some of the things that you can take advantage of when you own a small business.
Can you quickly talk about, like, when you were with Zayo 525 getting merged with Model Farm? What was even that whole legal process?
To be perfectly honest, it was very not legal. It was us having an agreement and writing a contract of what was involved in that. And I became an employee of Model Farm, so there was not a lot of like the business. Like, we didn't have to worry about whose name we were taking and things like that. It was very informal, to be honest. And I think that was fine for me. Sometimes we like get all caught up in what it has to be. And people have asked me the same thing, like, financially, how did that all play out and things like that. And for me, it was the best fit at the time. And for them, it was a good fit and it worked. And so you don't always have to make it more complicated than it is. And then there were times that, like I said, like when I had some personal issues and I wanted to like have this business doing these separate things, it was worth it to make it a little more complicated and hire an attorney and that kind of thing. I see too on your list of accountants, and maybe that's the next question, but I did my own taxes personally, but as soon as I started a business, I hired a small business accountant. There's some great ones here in Ames that they don't charge that much, and it's just worth it because there's so much deductions you can take as a small business owner that I really wanted to make sure. I mean, I definitely paid for that service in the amount of savings that I had in my taxes. So some things are worth it. Some things you can, maybe taxes are your thing and you're totally fine using TurboTax, and you absolutely can. So you just kind of like feel it out, like what's most important to you. Some people, having the legal structure done by an attorney is really important, and then make it a priority,
Cool. So I'm going to keep us moving. Pricing. So this was actually just brought up in the questions. but how do you know how much to charge for your services, and how do you even account for your own value? I know
Right.
this is a pretty difficult thing to do for new time freelancers.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would say, first of all, just know what the market is charging.
Mhm.
You can do some work and dig around and say, okay, well, I know that this person is just doing websites by themselves and they're charging this much for a website, and this agency is charging this much for a website, and this agency is charging 5 times more than that agency for the website. So you can do some digging. You can call around and ask people, like, what are their prices. Most people are going to tell you that it depends on your project.
Mhm.
um, and I would just say, just be transparent. Like, hey, I'm starting my own company. I'm trying to figure out how much I should charge. Can you give me some ideas? And if you called me at Model Farm and asked me that question, I would tell you, like, this is how we figure our quotes. It's based on this hourly rate, that kind of thing. So absolutely, upfront, you need to figure out what you're going to charge. And even though you don't have to charge an hourly rate, like, you don't only have to work by the hour, because there is value in things that are not hourly based. Like, there's value in your network, there's value in your skill set, there's value in the experience that you've had in a certain industry. So you can definitely, and actually I would recommend quoting projects on a project base rather than an hourly base. But at the end of the day, for the freelance industry, really, it is kind of based on hours. You have to figure out that that thing is going to take you 10 hours, and then you can add some time on for project management, add some time in there for your, those intangible skill sets I just mentioned, and then give the project price. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of figure out, how much is my time worth? And if you are really amazing at, digital marketing, and you only want to work 10 hours a week, then you better be charging a lot for your services. And if you're like, nope, I'm just getting started, gosh, I'm a student still, and I'm just learning, and I haven't, I'm slower at design, or I haven't done a lot of work yet, it's okay to charge less and build. You can always change your pricing model as you continue to get more and more clients under your belt. And
Mhm.
in working with those nonprofits that might have a need and not a huge budget, or working with your friend who's starting their own thing and you can, like, swap services with them, you have to definitely build your portfolio. And it's okay to not just make a ton of money right up front. You have to get going, and then you can adjust your prices. And I adjusted my prices multiple times in the 7 years. And in terms of, like, value, it's really good. I had a business coach. My friend happened to be a business coach, and so I traded services with her.
Mhm.
And having someone else to tell you, like, no, you are valuable. What you're providing is valuable, is really, really helpful, because it is easy to be like, there's no way I could charge $100 an hour. Like, that's insane. Like, I'm charging $15 an hour. And having someone else from the outside say, no, no, like, everyone else is charging $100 an hour. Why aren't you? is
Mhm.
really is really helpful.
So real quick on the invoicing and billing,
Mhm.
what would you recommend? Getting paid up front, getting paid split halfway, or once the work is actually done?
I always, from the very beginning, did half up front, half at the end. That was just a really clean cut way for me personally to do invoicing. And I
Mhm.
really felt like if the client wanted the project, they'd be willing to pay half up front. And then, they got their final project before they really had to pay the balance. And I don't know that I ever in 7 years had any pushback to half up front, half at the end. If you're working with, like, Iowa State, sometimes they want to have you bill, like, a little bit more incrementally, like on a website. They don't want to do half up front, half at the end, because it's a big project. So they'll
Mhm.
do something like, you can pay them out when you get the wireframe done, and then you can pay them out when your copywriting is done, and then you can pay them out when the development is done. So sometimes you have bigger entities that might be more likely to have a little bit more rules around it. But for me, that always really worked well. And from a cash flow perspective, you don't want to have all your eggs in this one basket and not have any money down, and then have a client piece out on you, and you're not getting paid.
So any recommendations on the actual software to use for invoicing?
Yeah, I actually invested in QuickBooks up front, and I would probably not recommend that again. It was a lot of money for me at the time and the amount of revenue I was making. And nowadays, I think there's FreshBooks is like a very common, almost like QuickBooks software that is free until you like reach a certain amount, I think. And I know I've seen lots of freelancers using lots of different software that's out there that is really like a small monthly fee, like $10 or $15 a month or something like that. So I would probably recommend something in line with FreshBooks. I know there's other options. Instead of diving into QuickBooks, it's pretty expensive upfront.
Thank you. So moving on, so we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm kind of being mindful of time. So Absolutely. Let's talk about the project scopes and proposals and what really needs to go into that, if you can, quickly.
Yes, absolutely. Like when you are meeting with a client up front, ask 1,000 questions. When you think you've asked enough questions, keep asking more questions, because you will uncover then what they really, really need and what is valuable to them. Maybe it's valuable that it's really fast. Maybe it's valuable that it's super detailed. Maybe it's valuable, whatever it might be. The more questions you ask, the better your quote will be for them. And then, like, as much as you can, outline those deliverables that you can use as your checklist at the end of the project. Have I done these 10 things that I said I would deliver? And it keeps you from having scope creep, which is, you said you would give them 2 rounds of revisions, and now they're on round 4 or 5 or 10 or 15. You can reference back to your quote that you gave them and say, hey, you know, this was quoted giving you 2 rounds of revisions. I've been nice and I've given you an extra one, but we're probably like going to need to talk about the budget if you think you're going to need more revisions, things like that. Timeline is important. It's like any agreement. You have both seen it, you have both signed it, and it's the thing that you go back to when things are sort of getting out of line.
Okay. So getting more into the client, we've already talked a lot about prospecting, but kind of talk about onboarding and even difficult situations with clients, how to deal with that.
I have a whole chapter in the book on dealing with difficult clients if you ever need it. Onboarding a client, like up front, communication is so important. If it is important to you that they meet every single timeline you give them, tell them up front. If it's important that you don't start until you have every single file that you need for that project, tell them up front. Just whatever is important to you and the market that you're trying to reach. So for me, I was working with small business owners. I knew that they were never going to have everything that they needed up front, but that wasn't important to me. What was important to me is that we were communicating regularly. I could not handle it if it was like nobody was answering my stinking emails. So up front, saying what's important to you, and then making sure that they agree to that, and that they're the right client. You don't have to take every single client. I definitely turned clients down and said, you know what, we're just not a great fit for you. That's better than getting in the middle of a project and having somebody not be happy. And then communication. I mean, we're in the industry of communication, and you cannot over communicate. So setting the expectations, communicating the expectations, talking to them about the expectations that you communicated is how you get through difficult situations. And being really transparent is never, I think that we kind of get into this society that we have to like be all buttoned up and know exactly what we're doing. And there were many times that I just said, you know what, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that I screwed that up, or I didn't communicate well, or, whatever it was, because we're all going to make mistakes as we're growing these businesses. I think that goes a really, really long way. Just being honest and saying, I'm sorry when you screw something up. I can't tell you the number of times the client's like, I know, we're all small business owners. We're figuring it out together, that kind of thing.
So this kind of backs up to where we started, but as you're talking about subcontractors and we're talking about company of one, this is just a really good list to first start with when thinking about if you don't have that skill set. And then I know we've been referencing the company of one, but it is a book, and it's really about making a business better than making it bigger. And so it's kind of quite contrarian to what a lot of people think in business is about scale and growth and having 20 clients and then 40 clients next year. So can you talk about a little bit how you were more strategic too in your company?
Absolutely. This is a great slide, actually. I knew from the very, very beginning that I never wanted to have employees. There's so much involved in human resources, and I didn't want to do it. It's not my skill set to manage people. I wanted people who are managing themselves because that's the kind of person I like. And so I think that instead of always thinking about getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because you will then run out of time, you can be more strategic about what is my value. Gosh, I have all these people who want me and no time to do it. Then you know what that means? You need to charge more money. And then you can only have the people who really, really value you. And that's the evolution of at some point, obviously, you will tap out, but not really. I mean, there are lots of consultants that are getting paid $400 or $500 an hour because they're valuable. And so, if you only have 2 clients that are paying you $200 an hour, like, wouldn't that be nice? Than having 4 clients that are paying you $100 an hour, or 8 clients paying you 50. It's you know, you start to get into a space where you can charge more for your expertise, and you don't start there, but definitely you will get burnout if you just keep trying to grow at the $15 an hour rate. Is you have to do more work to make the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm. That's very well said. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I know we have a few in the chat. So I'm going to start off with Kendra's. What does your typical work week look like? Hours? Are you working from home or in the office?
Right now, I have the best situation I could have ever dreamed of. I had a baby 6 months ago, and so I now get to work part-time for Model Farm doing only sales. So for me, the sales component, that networking was my sweet spot, is what I love to do. Project management is what got me there. But I work basically mornings. I have daycare in the mornings, and then I go get my little guy and I play with him in the afternoons. And I definitely answer emails on my phone and take phone calls when he's napping. And I still live the work-life integration that 100% is part of this industry, I would say. But it's evolving. Like, I have a team behind me who can do the work that I never had when I was the company of one. And so for me, that worked at this life stage. And it's great. I work from home. Sometimes I go in the office. Sometimes I don't. I go to the cafe and sit at a table and drink coffee. It's great. That's the iMarketer life right there.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up so if anyone else has questions.
I did see one question. Somebody was asking about how to get involved with Model Farm. If you're a student still, and we are always looking for talent. So if you're interested in just finding out more about how Model Farm works and the job opportunities there, you can email info@model-farm.com. I could put that in the message here, and just say, hey, I heard about you and I'm looking for more information, and then our director will get back to you. I'll put it in here real quick.
Cool.
We would love to have people who are interested in learning about this biz.
Awesome. So I do have on the screen, so Samantha's information is up there if you guys have any follow-up questions. I know after this, tomorrow, we will be sending out an email to all of you guys with a survey. First, just kind of get some feedback. We will have a recording of this link. And we also are going to be providing some fun cliff notes about the conversation we just had. So feel free to kind of check for that. But any final questions as we come up on the 1 o'clock hour here? Or Samantha, if there's anything that you would kind of share as a...
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. My passion is like sharing how I got to where I got and helping people get to where they want to go, and they're not the same path. But I'm happy to, help anybody as you're on this journey. So feel free to reach out to me via email or phone. But yeah, I would really say, like, as you're starting, don't feel like you have to know everything that I got to 10 years later. And on day one, I think it can get overwhelming. And sometimes people get paralyzed by thinking that they don't know how to do it. And I absolutely had no idea what I was doing and just figured it out along the way. And it worked. So that was always my takeaway. Like, just try, and you'll find out that nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all figuring it out still. And 10 years later, I'm in a position that I never would have thought I would be in. And so just, getting to that point is a journey, and that's sort of part of the fun.
Yeah. And we can all get behind that too, because at the Papa John Center, we're all about experiential learning, which is literally learning by doing. So it's really right into the story of where you started. So thank you, Samantha, very much for joining us today and for the very first workshop to kick off the Side Hustle series. And yeah, as Samantha said, if you have any questions, reach out to her. If you have any questions for the Papa John Center, our email is on there as well. But with that, thank you guys.
Thank you for having me.